Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, church. It is wonderful to be here with you this morning, and simultaneously, it's pretty unnerving to be up here instead of in my seat there. When Britton asked me a couple of months ago if I would do this, and I said yes, it's just been in the last couple of weeks that I've learned that there are light bars down here, and there's blue tape on the floor that means things as far as where you're standing. You hear your voice in different places. So Amy and Caleb were both so sweet to me this past week to let me come in and kind of get a little bit familiar with this. So obviously, I don't have any qualifications to be up here. I've not been to seminary. I don't have any training, but Pastor Britton asked me to share my message with you that is my story over the last 6 years. That is really just a story of transformation and living in partnership with Jesus. So 6 years ago, my life looked pretty similar to the way it does today, but my heart did not. So I wasn't even aware. And one afternoon, I was in Mercy Park. I'd been speed walking and running up and down stairs, and my heart decided to release a blood clot. Luckily, it came out on the downside and not the upside, because the upside is really, really bad. The downside was bad enough, but luckily it went down into my foot. And even more luckily, I have a great cardiologist, and that is Dr. John Cox, and he's actually a member here of this church. So he went to work on my heart, and I will tell you that if someone tells me that I have heart failure, I want to know why and what caused it. I was diagnosed with idiopathic cardiomyopathy, which means heart failure for no reason. It's not cool. I had no heart disease. I had no heart damage. Didn't have lifestyle that needed to be changed. So what it did for me, which would end up being probably the greatest blessing of my entire life, is it stripped me from the illusion that I had control. And suddenly I felt dependent. I was so afraid, not afraid of dying, but I was afraid of not being here to be responsible for my family, especially my teenage son. Because again, there was that illusion of control in my life, like what would happen if I wasn't here tomorrow? Of course, everything, would go to heck. So I felt in that moment very, very weak. And we all know what God does with our weakness. In 2 Corinthians, book 12, verse 9 through 10, Paul talks about the thorn that is put in his side. It's meant to discomfort him. And he says, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, I am strong.'" So while Dr. Cox worked on my heart health, God worked on my belief. And as I said to you, my greatest blessing of heart failure, in my weakest, most desperate moment, I encountered Jesus. And I now know the huge difference between living a life where you are filled with the Holy Spirit and you are Spirit-led, and not, and I'm just going to tell you it's huge. And when you know, you know. Today I get to live a life that is filled with certainty and free of doubt. I have an intimate friendship with Jesus that gives me freedom and fearlessness, and this is where my adventure begins. So during this time, I instinctively sought a deeper relationship with Christ, and I prayed to Christ to become love, not to be able to love, because I was already capable of loving, and I did love, but I prayed to become love, and I'm just going to give you a piece of advice. If you pray to become love, you better be ready. Because God will change us when we truly want to be changed, and He will lead us when we are ready to follow. He will also make us different and give us everything that we need to be difference makers. He will help us to understand and connect with others who we think we have nothing in common with when we are ready to be in relationship with those people and find out that we do, in fact, have things in common. He will also teach us the wisdom of love for everyone, even when this world tries to teach us the opposite. He wants us to be His hands and feet, because love is action, and in the words of author Bob Goff, love does. It is action. So many of you in this room right now know me, and probably if we're Facebook friends, you have probably seen lots of posts over the years and know that for many years now I have served as an advocate and a helper and a friend to adults with disabilities. I'm going to tell you that I far prefer different abilities because we all have both. So I already had a calling, except that God was about to give me one more. That's what I got for praying to become love. So about a year into my life of being Spirit-led, I received one day one of the clearest, most direct calls from God that I was supposed to serve Joplin's oldest residential shelter for people who are experiencing homelessness, and that is Souls Harbor. And like so many other people that we see throughout biblical history who are called to a task by God, I was absolutely unqualified. Nothing about me made me right for this calling. In my 47 years of life, I had never one time been inside a homeless shelter anywhere. Growing up, I was very comfortable. I had never had a time in my life where I did not have any resources. I'm a banker, so I work in an environment that is very, very clean and comfortable, and I'm even going to admit to you that back then, I was a bit of a germaphobe. I had camped growing up, but only by choice. But like we see throughout the Bible, when God calls someone and their answer to him is, "You have made a mistake, it's not me, I'm not qualified," he basically ignores them and keeps moving them forward. And so the following day, I picked up the phone and I called Diana Gurley. She is the executive director of Souls Harbor, and said, "I'm supposed to help you." And to my amazement, she not for 1 second doubted that I had been called by God. So that is really the beginning. And in the beginning, with the help of my dear friend, Tammy Swab, and my mom, who is here today, she's sitting right down there, we began providing for the needs of parents who were living in Souls Harbor with their children. Now, a lot of people don't think about children living in a homeless shelter, but they do. I will tell you, in 2023, we served 49 kids at Souls Harbor. So we were providing clothing, Christmas gifts, birthday parties, like the entire thing, and I absolutely loved it, but I was always uncomfortable when I would take things to be dropped off. And I hurried in and I hurried out, and I didn't really want to be there. It was just discomfort for me. What I've also learned about what God does with our weakness, he does similar things with our discomfort. And I can tell you that he does not mind at all for us to be uncomfortable. He will, in fact, lead us to places where we aren't comfortable because he knows that we're more likely to seek him in our discomfort than we ever are in our comfort. In the Gospel of Matthew, in chapter 5, Jesus taught his disciples about the 8 truths that are known as the Beatitudes, which are all about discomfort. And here are just a couple of the 8. Number 6 is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Number 10 is, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So one day while I was taking donations into the shelter, I was waiting in the hallway for someone to come and get this big box from me. And on the other side of the wall is the office, and I could hear a young woman sobbing. And she was telling her husband that she did not want to come to a homeless shelter. She didn't want to live there. And I will never forget how kind and gentle he was when he answered her, but he told her that they didn't have a choice. And as I stood there and listened, because I am kind of a problem solver by nature, I wanted so badly to go around into the office and tell her that it was all going to be fine. Everything was going to be all right. But what I realized is I wasn't qualified to make that promise. I didn't know. And so when I left that day, I realized that I was no longer going to just be bringing things in. I was called to work. So about 3 years ago, I started serving as a nighttime volunteer staff. I work every Wednesday night, and most importantly, what I want you to know is that I don't deserve any credit. None of this is me. It wasn't my idea, and I wasn't the right person to choose for this. I wasn't necessarily empathetic or kind. I'm not telling you that I was a horrible person, because I wasn't. But I had my fair share of less than stellar moments and bad choices. I could be very judgmental, critical, sarcastic. And so what I have learned from this is that God will change us. He will lead, we just have to follow. So today, 3 years later, I am just a regular family member at Souls Harbor. I am as comfortable inside as I am out. I have many dear friends who have overcome homelessness and many who have not. I want you to know just a little bit about what I do inside, what it is like. So I have held babies that have come in from situations of living in cars that are covered in bed bug bites and wearing dirty diapers because there are no more clean ones. I have lost people that I care deeply about to death and to addiction. I've quietly listened to more than one desperate phone call made by someone who has burned all of their bridges, promising that they'll change and they'll do better if they can only come home. My heart has been broken more times than I can possibly count. But what I want you to know that's just as important is that there are also many wonderful times of friendship and family and laughter. Shannon Faulkner comes into the office and plays guitar, and he lets me sing, which really nobody should have to listen to that. But he actually learns songs for me. They can be really, really wonderful times. Our residents are constantly trying to provide things for me. They make things for me. This is a picture of me with my friend Sheila and my prayer shawl that she crocheted for me. I want to say that one of the most amazing things that was so surprising to me when I started at Souls Harbor was how generous people were. On the nights when we do overflow, so overflow is a time when the weather outside is very, very dangerous. The temperatures are dangerous, either far too hot or far too cold to survive in. And so we invite people to come in off of the street who are not our residents, but they come in so that they can get a snack, get a drink, warm up, or cool down, and have a place to sleep that's safe overnight. So they bring all of their things in with them, and it's just kind of this chaos in the office because we're breathalyzing people. We're taking their items and tagging them with their names because we're responsible for all that that person has. And probably one of the funniest things that anyone has ever offered me was one night during overflow. There was a man who offered me Takis. Do you know what Takis are? Like spicy snacks. And he offered them to me from an open bag inside his coveralls. I did not take them, but I will always remember the offering. The blessings have been more than I could tell you in hours. And in fact, Mike and I now have a bonus family member who came into our life through Souls Harbor. Amy took this really sweet picture of us at worship night, and you may have even seen him with me sometimes on worship nights. So all of these blessings only confirm to me that God intends us to be helpers and doers and be his hands and feet. He gave us his son Jesus as the finest example that would ever exist on earth as humble servant. And Jesus truly was, love does. He healed on the Sabbath. He loved the wrong people. He advocated for the disadvantaged and the marginalized. And he never stopped to ask someone if they deserved his help or point out that they weren't worthy. He was love in action. And we are called to live like Jesus and to love like Jesus. This is our statement. We have the t-shirts, the stickers, and the cups. And what does this look like? I believe that we are all called to be helpers and healers. And I want to say that in my heart, I truly believe that God is deeply saddened at how our world has made it so easy to ignore each other. Social media lets us ask for unspoken prayers, and we can so easily send our thoughts and prayers. But I'm going to tell you that I think that God is probably pretty disappointed in our little prayer hands. I think what he would like us to do is do something. And what would happen if we saw prayer requests as a call to action? What if we stopped to ask someone, how can I help you? What do you need? Do I have it? Are we worried that we aren't qualified? Because I'm proof that you don't have to be. Do you feel like you don't have anything to give? Don't worry, because God doesn't rely on you to have expertise and a lot of money and resources. He just needs you to say yes. And he already knows you at your strongest and best. And he sees all of you as someone who looks like him. My friend Tracy always says you can't outgive God. And truly, she's right. God has never relied on us, and he doesn't fail. He has invited me to partner with him on some pretty crazy things over the last 3 years, and none of them have failed. And I've been pretty unqualified for almost all of them, and this is how I've become fearless, because I know that God is the strength. What would you attempt if you knew that you couldn't fail? So there's an old joke that says a fellow was stuck on his rooftop in a flood. He was praying to God for help, and soon a man in a rowboat came by and shouted to the man, "Jump in, I can save you." The stranded fellow shouted back, "No, it's okay. I'm praying to God, and he is going to save me." So the rowboat went on. Then a motorboat came by, and the driver shouted to the fellow, "Jump in, I can save you." And the stranded fellow shouted back, "No thanks. I'm praying to God, and he's going to save me." And the water continued to rise. Then a helicopter came down, and the pilot shouted, "Grab this rope, and I will lift you to safety." And again, the stranded man said, "No thanks. I'm praying to God, and he is going to save me. I have faith." And the water rose, and the man drowned. So when he got to heaven, he said to God, "I had faith, and you let me drown. Why didn't you save me?" And God replied, "I sent you a rowboat, a motorboat, and a helicopter. What more did you expect?" So I know that right now my husband is totally blown away that I put a joke in my sermon and I said it in church because he's the funny one and I'm the serious one. We both admit that. But I also want to add that he's incredibly kind and generous. He is my greatest supporter, and some of the crazy stuff that I do to help others could not happen if it weren't for his support. He never counts the cost. I also want to tell you that although I will be forever grateful for the greatest gift of heart failure, I'm also incredibly thankful for Dr. John Cox, and when he was driving the motorboat, I got in. So what I want you to consider is that maybe you are meant to paddle a rowboat or to drive a motorboat or pilot a helicopter to someone in need. Don't worry if you don't have the skills, you don't have a license. It's okay. God does. God just needs you to be willing, and he wants us all to be a part of what he's doing every day. He's got the how figured out. He knows the way. He only needs you to say yes. And I would say that being a part of how Jesus is working in the lives of those in need will bless you back 1,000,000 times over in ways that you could never imagine. So I tell you, please don't miss out on what could be the greatest adventure of your life on earth with Jesus. Thank you.